The kingdom of Halden sat under a gray sky, where tall stone walls guarded wide streets and cold wind moved through banners like a warning. People in the capital had learned to live with fear, because demons had been gathering beyond the border for weeks, and every rumor made the streets feel smaller. Inside the Royal Academy, where young fighters trained for honor, rank, and service, one boy stood apart from the rest. His name was Kaito, a slim young man with black hair, tired eyes, and a quiet face that made him look weaker than he truly was. He came from no noble house, held no great title, and wanted only one thing, which was to prove that he could protect the people he loved. Beside him stood Aria, a bright young woman with silver hair, sharp eyes, and calm confidence, and she mattered because she was the academy hero, the best student in the kingdom, and the only person who ever seemed to believe Kaito could become someone important. But the problem at the heart of the story was already clear, because the kingdom had called Kaito worthless after a royal trial failed. And if that judgment stood, he would lose his future, lose Aria, and lose the chance to stand against the coming darkness. The royal trial took place in a hall of white stone, under hanging lights that made every face look colder than it was. The judges sat high above the floor, the captains stood behind them, and the academy students watched like they were waiting for a show. Kaito stepped into the circle with his hands steady but his chest tight, because he knew this trial would decide whether he could join the front-line defenders. Aria had trained with him for months, and she had promised that they would rise together, even if the kingdom doubted them both. Yet the trial was built to favor control and raw talent, and Kaito had neither in the way the judges wanted. When the final test began, he was pushed past his limits by a flood of pressure, and his ability failed in front of everyone. The room went silent, then cruel whispers spread like poison. Lord Victor, one of the royal judges, was a proud and harsh man with steel-gray hair and a sharp mouth, and he wanted strong symbols, not flawed people, because he believed only perfect warriors deserved to defend the kingdom. He pointed at Kaito and called him a waste of time, and the academy students followed his lead with smug looks and bitter laughter. Aria watched all of it, and fear slowly took over her face because she was brilliant, practical, and terrified of being pulled down with him. She told herself she was choosing the kingdom, but in truth she was choosing safety. So when Kaito reached for her in the crowd, she stepped back instead of forward. That small motion cut deeper than any failure, because it told him that even the person who knew him best no longer wanted to stand beside him. Kaito left the academy alone while rain began to fall over the city gates. The kingdom was already shaking because demon raids had broken the outer farms, and soldiers were being sent out in desperate groups to hold the line. Kaito, now branded useless, was ordered away from the defense routes and told to stay clear of any battle. He could have broken then, but humiliation had a strange effect on him. It emptied the noise from his head and left only one simple thought, which was that if the kingdom would not trust him, he would still protect people in whatever way he could. He took the narrow east road toward the outer fields, where smoke rose from burned wagons and shattered stone marked the path of a retreating fight. There, on a broken ridge above a demon-ravaged battlefield, he saw wounded soldiers crawling back through ash and mud, and he saw creatures with long horns and black armor pressing them down. Among the chaos stood a demon commander named Thorn, a broad and cruel warrior with dark red hair and a face full of cold patience. Thorn did not attack for chaos alone. He attacked because the demon emperor had ordered a strike on Halden, and the emperor wanted the capital weakened before the final assault. Thorn believed fear was the fastest way to break a kingdom, and he planned to make the people surrender before the walls could even be tested. Kaito was terrified, but he also saw children and soldiers trapped between the broken line and the dark army, and something inside him refused to let that stand. He ran forward anyway, and the battlefield answered him in a way no one expected. A demon blade split the air near him, a burst of force threw him to the ground, and pain flashed through his body. Instead of stopping him, that pain awakened something deep and hidden, as if a sealed door inside his soul had finally cracked open. He saw black and gold light rising from his chest, and in that light he felt broken pieces of his own spirit moving like shattered glass finding shape. A voice inside the storm told him that his soul was not weak, only fractured, and that each wound could be turned into momentum if he accepted the flow instead of resisting it. Kaito staggered to his feet as lines of light wrapped around his arms, shoulders, and brow, and from those fragments he forged a living crown above his head. It was not made of gold or stone, but of glowing soul energy that bent and shifted with his breathing. The crown did not make him royal in title, but it made him dangerous in a new way, because every hit he endured became power he could send back. When a demon struck him, the force did not end in pain alone. It fed the crown, pushed his body forward, and turned his next movement into a crushing burst of speed. Kaito, the boy once mocked for weakness, suddenly moved like a storm with a human heart inside it. The first demon soldier rushed him, and Kaito took the blow across his shoulder, then spun and drove the force forward in a sharp strike that sent the enemy crashing back. Another came from the side, and Kaito let the hit drive him into a low slide before rising with a sudden burst that knocked the creature from its feet. The living crown glowed brighter each time he was forced to adapt, and with each clash he understood the rule of his new power more clearly. Pain was not the end, pressure was fuel, fracture could become force. The wounded soldiers around him stared in shock, then gathered courage when they saw one abandoned boy holding the line. Kaito did not think of glory, and he did not think of revenge. He thought of survival, of the people behind him, and of the simple fact that he had finally found the strength to answer the world that had dismissed him. But Thorn noticed the change at once, and his cold eyes narrowed with interest. He ordered his forces to overwhelm Kaito before the strange power could grow. So the battlefield became harsher, the sky darker, and the stakes climbed higher with every step, because if Kaito failed here, the outer line would collapse and the path to the capital would open wide. Kaito pushed deeper into the broken field, where shattered wagons burned and old defense towers had fallen into the dirt. There he found Aria again, surrounded by retreating guards and forced to watch the battle from a distance she could no longer control. She had come with a royal escort to assess the damage, and now her calm face was gone, replaced by shock and shame. She saw Kaito moving through the chaos with the crown of light above him, and for the first time she understood that she had not left a weak boy behind. She had abandoned the person who would have saved them all if only someone had believed in him sooner. Yet even then, Aria was not simply cruel or foolish. She had grown up inside a kingdom that rewarded the visible and punished the uncertain, and when the judges called Kaito worthless, she had feared that standing with him would destroy her chance to help anyone at all. That choice made sense to her once, but now it looked like a cowardly mistake. Before she could speak, Thorn attacked the field with a heavy wave of demons, and the force of the strike pushed everyone back toward the city road. Kaito moved in front of the retreating soldiers, taking hit after hit, each one feeding his crown until the light around him shone like a fierce halo. Aria finally shouted his name, not as a command, but as a plea, and that was the first honest thing she had said to him since the trial failed. Kaito turned toward her, and in that moment he did not see the academy girl who walked away. He saw a frightened person trying to make sense of the damage she had helped create. He did not forgive her yet, but he also did not hate her. That was the first sign that he had changed, because the old Kaito would have clung to the wound and let it define him. The new Kaito used the wound as strength and kept moving. With one deep breath, he drove the crown into a brighter shape, and the energy around him surged like a living shield. He forced Thorn back step by step, then broke through the enemy line and opened a path for the soldiers to retreat. The demon commander snarled in anger, not because he had lost the field, but because he had learned that the kingdom now had a protector no one had expected. Still, the larger battle was not over. Far beyond the smoke, the capital bells began to ring, which meant the demon emperor had begun the main attack, and Halden itself was now in danger. Kaito looked toward the city walls, then at Aria, then at the frightened people gathering behind them. He understood at last that his life no longer belonged to the judgment of the academy. It belonged to the promise he had made to himself in the rain. He would return to the capital. He would face the people who called him worthless. And he would stand between them and the darkness, even if the whole kingdom had to see the crown of ash and soul fire rising above the boy they had tried to erase. The road ahead was still long, and the next battle had only just begun. The road away from the academy was narrow, wet, and silent, and the cold night wind pushed through the broken trees like a warning. Kaito walked at the front with his torn dark uniform clinging to his slim frame, his worn boots sinking into the mud with each careful step. Above him, the living crown hovered in a slow, unstable circle made of black and gold light that looked like shattered glass held together by fire. It pulsed whenever the last battle still echoed in his body, and each pulse seemed to turn his pain into something sharper, something stronger. Behind him came the people who had chosen to follow, not because they trusted him, but because they had seen enough to know that the academy had lied. There was Mina, a quiet girl with brown hair and nervous hands, who had once helped Kaito study in secret because she believed kindness mattered more than rank. There was Ben, a broad young man with black hair and a stubborn face, who wanted to prove that strength should protect people instead of crush them. There was also Alina, a woman with red hair and a torn healer robe, who cared about the wounded more than she cared about titles, and who had seen too many good people suffer under proud rulers. They had all gathered behind Kaito because the same question burned in every mind. If the Academy could reject a boy who carried that much power, then what else had the kingdom hidden? Kaito did not answer them right away because he was still learning how to carry the weight of being seen. For years, people had looked at him and found only weakness. Now they looked again, and some of them began to fear what they had never understood. The first miles passed under a sky with no stars, and the silence gave Kaito time to remember the voice of the judgment hall, the cold eyes, and the cruel certainty that he had been nothing. That memory did not break him now. It steadied him. He knew that his life no longer belonged to their opinions. It belonged to the promise he had made in the rain when he had decided that if the world wanted a monster, then it would have to face the boy who refused to kneel. Still, the road to the capital was not safe because Lord Victor was already moving pieces into place. Victor was the royal judge of the Eastern Gate, a man with steel-gray hair, pale skin, and a formal robe of gold trim that made him look like law itself. He wanted order, but his idea of order was simple and cruel. He believed the kingdom stayed strong only when the weak obeyed, the gifted served, and the truth stayed hidden inside locked rooms. He had helped silence the signs of the coming darkness because he thought fear would keep the people calm. Instead, his fear had made him blind. Victor had heard reports of the crown above Kaito, and he had sent riders ahead to stop the boy before he reached the capital walls. He did not want Kaito dead. He wanted Kaito controlled because a living symbol of power could be used, while a free symbol of hope could start a rebellion. That was why the next danger mattered so much. Before sunrise, the group reached a ruined bridge over a black river, and there they found the first sign that Victor had already closed the road. Broken wagons blocked the far end, and masked guards stood in a line with spears lowered. Kaito stopped, and the living crown brightened as if it sensed hostility before anyone spoke. Then a low laugh rolled out from the shadows on the bridge, and Thorn stepped forward. He was broad, tall, and terrifying in a calm way, with dark red hair, glowing yellow eyes, and black armor marked by horn shapes that curved from his shoulders like a beast made for war. His battle cloak hung in torn strips, and smoke drifted from it as if he had walked through fire to get here. Thorn was a demon commander, one of the dark forces moving under the kingdom's surface, and his motive was simple enough to understand. He wanted the crown for his master because the crown was not just power, it was a key. Long ago, the crown had been made to hold back a sealed darkness, and now that seal was weakening. Thorn had been sent to find the one person whose soul could awaken it fully. He looked at Kaito with cruel interest, as if he had been waiting for this exact meeting. Aria stood beside Kaito then, and her presence changed the air at once. She was a young woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, white armor plates over an elegant battle outfit, and a dark blue cloak that moved behind her like a banner. She had once looked at Kaito with calm pride and a sharp mind, but now her face carried something new, something broken and uncertain. Aria had come from the capital under Victor's authority, believing she was sent to oversee the return of a dangerous student. She had also believed the Academy reports, which said Kaito was unstable and unworthy. But the sight of the living crown above him and the way it answered his pain forced doubt into her heart. She had begun to realize that the people she served might not be protecting the kingdom at all. They might be feeding it to the enemy. Thorn raised one hand and told Kaito that the crown did not belong to a rejected boy. It belonged to the darkness under the capital and to the line of rulers who had hidden the truth for generations. Then he made the bridge tremble with a harsh wave of force, and the guards behind him spread out to trap the group between steel and river. Kaito felt fear rise in his chest, but this time fear did not rule him. It sharpened his focus. The crown above his head flared brighter, and the black and gold light wrapped around his shoulders like a second sky. When the first clash came, he did not fight like a trained champion. He fought like someone who had been pushed down too many times and had learned the shape of every blow. Thorn struck hard, fast, and with cold skill, but each hit only fed the crown more power. Kaito was driven back, then steadied, then forced forward again as the crown turned impact into momentum. Mina and Ben pulled the guards away from the broken carts, while Alina dragged the wounded to safety near the river stones. Aria fought beside Kaito with precise cuts of light from her blade, and every motion showed her growing shame as she understood how badly she had judged him. The battle did not end the danger, it revealed it. When Thorn finally paused, he smiled and spoke the twist that changed everything. The crown had not awakened because Kaito was random or unlucky. It had awakened because Kaito was connected by blood to the original guardians of the seal, the ones who built the crown to keep the darkness buried. The Academy had not merely mocked him. Someone inside the royal system had tracked that bloodline, hidden it, and waited for the right moment to force the crown to wake under pressure. Victor had wanted Kaito nearby because he believed the boy could be shaped into a loyal tool. Thorn wanted him because he knew the seal would fail without him. Both sides had been watching him, and both had been wrong about what kind of person he would become. That revelation hit Kaito harder than any strike because it meant his suffering had never been an accident. It had been arranged. Aria saw the shock on his face, and for the first time she lowered her blade in honest regret. She told him that she had been taught to value rank over truth, and that she now understood how dangerous that lesson was. Kaito did not answer with anger. He looked toward the capital lights far in the distance and made a new choice inside himself. He would still return. He would still face Victor. But now he knew the battle was bigger than pride, bigger than revenge, and bigger than the academy that had shamed him. The kingdom itself was built on a lie, and the darkness beyond the bridge was only the first crack in the wall. As the river wind rose, the living crown surged higher above him, brighter than before, and Thorn took one step back for the first time. The demon commander was not beaten yet, and Victor's men were already moving in from the road behind them. Kaito stood in the center of the bridge, the crown blazing overhead, while Aria, Mina, Ben, and Alina gathered close. The next fight was coming fast, and this time it would decide whether the truth reached the capital at all. The bridge stood over the river like a narrow thread of stone, and the wind pushed hard through its broken rails. Dark clouds moved fast above the water, and the whole place felt trapped between storm and fate. Kaito stayed in the center with his black hair whipped around his face, his torn academy sleeves fluttering, and his tired gray eyes fixed on the enemies ahead. He looked worn and small beside the danger around him, but the living crown above his head burned brighter with each breath he took, as if pain itself had become fuel. Aria stood close on his left, her silver hair shining in the strange light, her blue eyes sharp, and her proud face now marked by worry she could no longer hide. Mina, with her brown hair and small nervous hands, kept close behind Kaito because she believed the truth was worth every fear. Ben, broad and stubborn, planted his boots on the stones and narrowed his eyes toward the road. Alina, with her red hair and tired healer robes, checked the bridge behind them and watched for anyone who might fall or be forced aside. Everyone knew the danger now, because if Victor won this crossing, the capital would never hear the truth, and the lie would keep ruling the land. Thorn stopped retreating and let out a low laugh that carried over the wind. His dark red hair hung wild beneath his horned black armor, and his glowing yellow eyes stayed locked on the crown above Kaito. He was not a mindless beast, and that made him worse because he understood exactly what the living crown meant. Long ago, before the first lie had reached the capital, Thorn had watched strong people bend the weak into silence, and he had chosen the same lesson for himself. He believed the world only respected power, so he wanted the crown for the same reason Victor wanted the truth buried. Victor wanted control, status, and a clean public story that made him look wise and noble. Thorn wanted the crown because it could turn pain into strength, and that kind of power would let him crush anyone who stood in his way. Those two motives were different, yet they led to the same place because both men wanted to own the future before anyone else could speak. Victor's men were already running in from the road behind the bridge, and their armor flashed in the wind as they spread out to trap the group from both sides. Kaito saw the net closing, and for one sharp moment his stomach tightened. Then the crown above him pulsed again, and that pulse carried a clear feeling, almost like a warning and a promise at the same time. It did not answer fear with comfort. It answered fear with motion. The first clash came fast. Thorn stepped forward, and the stones under his boots cracked with the weight of his charge. Kaito raised his arms on instinct, and the living crown flashed down a shield of black and gold light just as Thorn struck. The impact shook Kaito through his whole body, but instead of pushing him down, the force traveled upward into the crown and made it flare even harder. The bright edges sharpened like broken glass made of fire, and Kaito suddenly understood the rule that had been hiding inside the power. The crown did not simply protect him. It turned every blow into something sharper and every sharp moment into more power. That truth shocked him because it meant the pain he feared was also the path forward. Aria saw it too, and her calm face changed as she realized why Kaito had survived what should have broken him before. She had doubted him, and that doubt now looked small beside the truth in front of her. Ben rushed to the side and slammed into one of Victor's guards, forcing the man back from the rail. Elena pulled Mina behind a broken stone post, then used her healer supplies not only for wounds, but also to keep the group steady and focused. Mina, though shaking, looked toward Kaito and saw that his fear was not weakness. It was the first sign of a gate opening. Victor appeared at the far end of the bridge with his stiff royal judge coat and heavy gold trim, his steel-gray hair untouched by the wind because he stood so still. His sharp eyes looked cold and certain, like a man who had already decided the truth did not matter. He raised one hand and called for his men to advance, and his voice carried the sound of someone used to obedience. He was not fighting for justice. He was fighting because the truth would expose what he had done to climb higher, and he could not allow that. The hidden message the group carried would show how he had framed innocent people, taken power through fear, and sent lies to the capital so his own name would stay clean. That was why he wanted Kaito stopped. That was why he wanted Aria silent. That was why he wanted the crown seized before it could reveal anything else. Kaito looked from Victor to Thorn and understood at last that these enemies were linked by the same sickness. One used law to hide his greed, the other used strength to feed his rage. Both of them feared the same thing, a world where common people could learn what really happened. The bridge had become more than a place to cross. It had become a test of whether truth could stand against fear. Then Aria moved. She had been proud, distant, and careful since the start, but now her silver hair flashed as she stepped beside Kaito instead of behind him. Her blue eyes were clear, and her voice carried across the storm with a kind of regret that made every word heavier. She said she had trusted rank too easily, and she had mistaken Victor's polished face for honor. She had seen the signs before, but she had not wanted to believe them. That was her mistake, and she was finally brave enough to say it out loud. Kaito heard the honesty in her voice, and it gave him something stronger than sympathy. It gave him trust. Together they pushed forward while Ben broke the line of the nearest guards and Elena guided Mina to a safer spot near the center stone. Mina then did something small but important. She reached into her travel cloak and pulled out the sealed packet that held the copied record of Victor's crimes, the one thing they had carried through fear and mud and smoke because it could still change everything. That packet mattered because it was not just proof. It was a promise that ordinary people could stand up to lies. Victor saw it, and for the first time his face lost its calm. He shouted for Thorn to take the crown and crush the group before the proof could reach the capital. Thorn obeyed with a cruel grin, and he gathered dark force around his fists as he rushed in again. Kaito met the attack head-on. The crown blazed, the air shook, and the bridge groaned under the pressure. But this time Kaito did not only endure. He stepped into the force, took the impact, and let the crown turn that pain into a surge that pushed Thorn back one full step. It was not a victory yet, but it was the first real sign that the demon commander could be moved. At the same time, the bridge itself betrayed how close they were to disaster. The first crack in the wall widened, stones loosened, and a section near the rail dropped with a sharp crash into the river below. Everyone froze for one breath because now the fight could not continue in the same place forever. If too much force hit the bridge, it would give way, and then no one would reach the capital with anything. Kaito looked at the gap, then at his friends, and then back at the enemies, and something inside him settled into a new shape. He was no longer the weak boy who only tried to survive each next blow. He was the one carrying the truth now, and that meant he had to choose more than survival. He had to choose direction. He remembered why Mina had trusted him, why Ben had stayed, why Elena kept helping, and why Aria had finally admitted her mistake. They were here because they wanted a better world, not just a safer one. Kaito raised his head, felt the living crown hover above him like a sharp star of black and gold light, and understood that the crown was not asking him to be fearless. It was asking him to keep moving while afraid, so he took one slow step forward and the others followed his lead. Victor saw that shift, and his cold certainty turned into something tighter and more dangerous. Thorn saw it too, and his cruel smile faded for the first time. The bridge still shook. The enemies were still close. The road behind them still filled with men. But Kaito now stood differently, and that change made the next choice matter more than any blow. The truth was still not safe, and the road to the capital was still far away, yet the first real crack in Victor's control had already spread, and everyone on the bridge could feel that the next moment would decide far more than this fight alone. The wind moved hard across River Bridge, and the old stone path trembled under every step, while the river below flashed dark and fast between cracked rails. Victor stood at the far side in his formal royal judge outfit, steel gray hair neat as ever, and his pale face had lost some of its calm because Kaito now stood with a new force around him. Thorn, the broad demon commander with dark red hair and horned black armor, held the front line with a cruel smile that no longer felt easy. Mina, the quiet young woman with brown hair and a travel cloak, stayed close to the center because she knew the truth they carried was worth danger. Ben, the broad young man with black hair and a leather vest, guarded the side with a stubborn stare. Elena, the red-haired healer in a torn robe, kept one hand on her supplies and one eye on the wounded. Aria, the silver-haired academy fighter in white armor plates and a dark blue cloak, looked frozen for a moment because she had seen Kaito change, and that sight cut through her pride. The danger was simple now, and everyone knew it. If Victor took the truth back to the capital, then the false story would live forever, and the people who had already suffered under his rule would never be heard. Kaito felt that weight, and for the first time he did not lower his eyes. Above him, the living crown of black and gold soul light floated in broken rings, sharp and bright, pulsing like a heart that had learned how to turn pain into power. Victor took one careful step forward, then raised his hand in a slow and practiced motion, like a man calling a verdict instead of starting a fight. He wanted control, and he wanted silence, because the truth Kaito carried could expose the hidden order that had fed Victor his status and made him untouchable. He had used fear for years, and every person around him had learned to obey before asking questions. That was why he hated Kaito so much. Kaito was not noble, not polished, and not easy to break, yet the truth had chosen him anyway. Victor spoke in a cold voice and ordered Aria to stand down because he expected her pride to win over her heart. For one tense breath, she almost listened. She had once believed that rank meant honor, and that Victor protected the kingdom because he wore the right clothes and spoke with the right authority. Now she saw the lie behind his posture, and regret moved across her face like a shadow. She looked at Kaito, then at the crown above him, and then at the trapped travelers behind him. Her blue eyes widened because she finally understood that Kaito was not fighting for himself. He was fighting so the weak would not be crushed again. Thorn laughed low and told Victor that the bridge was close to breaking, which made the threat sharper because the river was already pounding the supports. If the bridge collapsed, then the truth would sink with it, and everyone would be forced to retreat into Victor's lie. The first clash came fast, with steel, boots, and flying stone dust, and Kaito was hit hard enough to slide back. But the living crown flashed brighter, and the pain did not stop him. It fed him. He pushed forward with a sharp burst, striking with more speed than anyone expected, and the blow drove one of Thorn's fighters backward toward the rail. The enemies had not expected that kind of change, and their line wavered for only a moment, but that moment mattered. Mina saw it, and so did Ben and Elena. Mina, who usually hid her fear behind careful hands, now stepped forward with a small lantern of pale light that she had carried since the road began. She had no great power, and she never claimed to be brave like a soldier, but she had one gift that mattered. She could see false seals and hidden marks, and she had followed the trail of Victor's lies from the first village to this bridge. Ben planted himself beside her and used his broad body like a wall, because protecting people was easier for him than speaking, and he had already decided that if Victor wanted to break them, he would have to get through him first. Elena crouched beside a man who had been pushed down in the clash, and with quick hands she checked his arm, wrapped it, and pulled him back up before he could panic. Her warm face stayed calm, even with danger all around her, because she had spent too long helping people who were ignored by men like Victor. Together they formed a small shield behind Kaito, and that small shield changed the shape of the battle. Aria saw that too, and her hands tightened. She had been trained to follow orders, but the scene in front of her made those orders look empty. Victor noticed her hesitation and turned his sharp eyes on her like a blade. He did not just want the bridge, he wanted her obedience. He wanted every witness to return to the capital and repeat his story. That was the deeper crime hidden beneath the fight. This was never only about one road or one message. Victor had built his power on stolen reports, broken witnesses, and secret promises to people who feared the truth more than they feared him. If Kaito reached the capital, the chain could break. Victor needed to stop that now, and Thorn had been sent to make sure no one crossed alive into the next town. Then the twist came, and it hit harder than any strike. Aria looked at the black and gold crown above Kaito, and her face changed from shock to understanding because she finally recognized the mark inside the light. Long ago, during her own training, she had seen a sealed royal record that spoke of a soul crown, an ancient defense used only when a person was pushed to the edge by unfair harm. It was not evil, and it was not random. It answered to a person who refused to let pain turn into surrender. More than that, the record said the crown could only appear when the user carried a burden tied to a royal lie. Victor had hidden that record because it proved that the same kind of power had once belonged to those who stood against corrupt judges like him. The crown was not a curse. It was a sign that the kingdom had tried to bury justice itself. Aria whispered the truth aloud, and her voice shook because she realized Victor had ordered her academy lessons, her field assignments, and even her silence to keep this secret buried. She was not just doubting him now. She was standing on the wrong side of history. Victor heard her, and for the first time, fear crossed his face. Thorn snarled and moved in to cover that fear, rushing forward with a heavy swing that smashed into the bridge stones and sent shards skidding across the path. Kaito took the impact with the crown blazing overhead, and instead of falling, he used the force to launch himself in a sharp counterstep. The move was not flashy. It was controlled, and it came from his new understanding that pain did not have to rule him. He could shape it. He drove Thorn back one full pace, then another, and the demon commander finally lost his easy smile. But Kaito did not press for victory because he saw the real danger. The bridge was starting to split near the middle, and the rear stones were already loose from the repeated clashes. If this continued, everyone on it could be trapped between Victor's men and the river below, forced into a choice that no one should have to make. Kaito turned his head just enough to check on the others, and in that one glance the group understood his next move. He was not trying to win a proud duel. He was trying to save everyone on the bridge long enough to reach the capital. Ben noticed the widening crack first and shouted for the group to move toward the center span, where the stones were strongest. Alina grabbed the injured man under one arm and helped him across with quick, steady steps. Mina lifted her lantern and pointed to the hidden marks on the rail because the old bridge had repair lines that could hold if pressure stayed balanced. Aria moved too, but not under Victor now. She moved because she finally chose truth over rank. That choice mattered more than any single strike because it showed others that the lie could be broken. Victor shouted her name with bitter anger and ordered Thorn to end this, but Thorn was already losing space. Kaito advanced again, the living crown flashing brighter with each hit that came his way, and his tired gray eyes were no longer dull. They were focused. He had looked weak when this began, but now his posture carried a hard calm that no one could ignore. He did not know every answer yet, and he did not claim to. Still, he knew enough to act. Victor had hidden the royal record because the truth threatened his power. Thorn had been sent because brute force could silence people faster than words. Aria had doubted because she had been raised to trust authority. Mina had followed because truth mattered. Ben had come because people mattered. Alina had stayed because the wounded always came first. And Kaito stood in the center of them all, no longer a boy waiting for permission, but a young man who had decided that fear would not choose for him. The bridge still shook. The enemies were still close. The road to the capital still waited beyond the far side. Yet the first real crack in Victor's control had already spread through every heart on that bridge, and everyone there could feel that the next step would decide whether truth reached the city, or whether the lie closed around them all again. The wind kept pushing across River Bridge, and the stones under every footstep trembled like they were afraid to hold anyone up. Below, the fast water slammed against the supports, and above, dark clouds turned the whole crossing into a narrow strip of fear. Kaito stood in the middle of that danger with torn sleeves, worn boots, and tired gray eyes that no longer looked away. He was a young man now, not a boy waiting for approval, and everyone on the bridge could feel that change. Aria stood near him in her white armor plates and dark blue cloak, her silver hair moving in the wind, her bright blue eyes wide with shock that she tried hard to hide. Mina, a quiet young woman with brown hair and a small, nervous frame, stayed close because she believed truth mattered more than rank. Ben, a broad young man with black hair and stubborn eyes, planted his feet like a shield, ready to protect the weak. Alina, a tired healer with red hair and a warm face, held her supplies tight and watched every wounded breath around her. Ahead of them, Lord Victor waited in his formal royal judge outfit, his steel gray hair neat, his sharp eyes cold, and his gold trim shining like a warning. He wanted the bridge, the prisoners, and the story to end right there, because if the truth reached the capital, his lies would crack open in front of everyone who mattered. And beside his shadow stood Thorn, the broad demon commander with dark red hair, black-horned armor, glowing yellow eyes, and a cruel smile that never softened. He did not want honor. He wanted fear to keep working. He wanted the bridge to become a lesson that nobody would forget. Victor lifted one hand and the soldiers around him tightened their line. He spoke in a calm voice that carried too far across the bridge. He said Kaito was confused, dangerous, and unworthy of trust. He said Aria had been misled. He said Mina, Ben, and Alina were helping a troublemaker who would bring ruin to the city. Every word was meant to sound clean, but the bridge had already heard enough lies to know the shape of them. Kaito felt the living crown stir above his head, a shifting crown of black and gold soul light that looked like fractured glass and fire joined together. Its sharp edges pulsed once, then twice, each beat matching the hard pulse in his chest. He had not fully understood it before, only that it answered pain and turned impact into strength. Now the crown brightened as the soldiers took one step closer. Kaito felt the old fear return for 1 second, the fear of being smaller than everyone else, the fear of speaking and being ignored, the fear of moving and being crushed. Then he remembered the silence in the city, the sealed rooms, the frightened faces, and the way Victor had used duty as a mask for control. That memory gave him something stronger than fear. It gave him purpose. He stepped forward and said that Victor was hiding the truth about the capital, the bridge, and the attacks that had been blamed on harmless people. His voice was not loud, but it carried because it was steady. Aria looked at him in surprise because she had never heard him speak like that before. Victor narrowed his eyes and Thorn smiled wider because both of them understood that Kaito had stopped being easy to bend. Thorn moved first. He did not rush with wild anger. He walked forward with calm confidence, and that made him even more dangerous. His torn black cloak dragged across the stones, and the air around him seemed to darken with every step. He raised one hand and black smoke gathered low over the bridge, not enough to destroy it, but enough to cut sight and split the group apart. Victor wanted confusion and Thorn wanted fear. The smoke rolled between the defenders and the soldiers pushed in from both sides. Ben moved like a wall, shoving one attacker back with his shoulder and keeping the narrow path open. Alina pulled Mina behind her when the smaller woman nearly lost her footing, then checked the leg of a wounded guard who had been caught in the crush. Mina, though shaking, reached out and grabbed a fallen lantern so it would not roll into the river. That small act mattered because it kept the bridge from turning into a panic trap. Aria drew her weapon, her calm face finally breaking as shock turned into anger. She had trusted the order of the academy, and now she saw how easily that order could be used like a chain. She fought with clean and careful strikes, driving back one soldier, then another, but every move looked harder than before. Kaito felt the crown flare again as a heavy blow struck his side. Instead of folding, he pushed into the pain, and the living crown answered with a burst of black and gold light that forced the attacker back. The crown did not give him endless power. It gave him momentum when he refused to fall. That rule became clear in a single instant, and it changed the entire battle. Kaito understood that the more pressure he survived, the stronger his response became. Victor saw that understanding land, and for the first time, real concern touched his face. But then the next truth arrived, and it hit harder than the enemy's strike. Aria saw a mark on one of Victor's sealed papers, a royal sign used only by the inner court, and she remembered where she had seen it before. Not in a public order, but in private papers that had been kept from the Academy Council. She looked at Victor, and her voice came out low and broken as she asked why his seal appeared on reports that blamed innocent families for stealing supplies. Victor did not answer at first. That silence said more than words. Aria felt the world tilt inside her because she realized she had been defending a system that had been shaped by hidden hands. She had believed Victor was strict but fair. Now she saw that he had been directing fear upward, making the poor and weak carry blame for problems that his own people had created. The reason was simple and cruel. Victor wanted the capital to believe only in order, and order gave him power. If the truth spread, people would ask who had caused the shortages, who had blocked help, and who had made the academy hunt the wrong targets. So he had arranged lies, and he had needed people like Aria to repeat them without question. Aria staggered back as if the floor itself had moved beneath her. Kaito saw her face, and he did not blame her. He only understood that trust, once broken, hurt almost as much as any blow. Thorn used that moment to strike at the middle of the group, forcing Ben to brace and Alina to pull Mina behind a cracked stone pillar. The bridge groaned under the weight of the clash. For a second, it seemed as if the whole crossing might give way and drop every truth into the river below. Then the living crown blazed brighter than before, and Kaito moved with a speed that shocked even him. He crossed the space between fear and action, caught a falling beam before it could crash into Mina, and used the sudden impact to drive the enemy line back. The power did not come from anger alone, it came from choosing others over himself. Victor saw the line of his control slipping, and his pride turned sharper than his voice. He ordered Thorn to finish the bridge before Kaito could carry the truth any farther. Thorn obeyed because he served Victor only as long as the command kept feeding his own hunger for chaos. He raised both arms, and the smoke thickened into a heavy wall that pushed against the defenders and blocked the far side of the bridge. But Kaito had already seen the pattern. The bridge was not only a path, it was a test. Victor wanted to trap them in the middle, isolate the truth, and make it look like they had failed on their own. Kaito turned to Mina, Ben, Alina, and Aria, and for the first time he gave them direct orders instead of waiting to be told what to do. He told Ben to hold the center. He told Alina to keep everyone standing. He told Mina to watch the stones and call out any weak spots. He told Aria to trust what she had seen, not what she had been taught. Then he faced Victor and said that control built on fear always had a crack somewhere, and that crack was now open. Aria looked at Kaito, and the regret in her face deepened into something stronger. She did not fully forgive herself yet, but she chose to stand beside him anyway. That choice mattered more than any speech. Together, they forced Thorn back step by step, not by overpowering him in one strike, but by refusing to break apart. Ben drove one attacker into retreat. Alina kept a wounded guard conscious long enough to block a gap. Mina shouted when a broken stone began to slip, and Kaito shifted in time to avoid the collapse. The bridge still shook, and Victor still watched from the far side with cold, narrowed eyes. Yet now the truth had a path, and the people carrying it had chosen each other. As the smoke began to thin, Kaito saw the road to the capital waiting beyond the bridge, dark and long and full of danger. He also saw that this was only the first real break in Victor's wall, not the last. Somewhere ahead, more lies waited. Somewhere ahead, the capital would have to listen. And somewhere behind those sharp eyes, Victor was already planning how to strike back. The night air over River Bridge stayed cold even after the smoke began to thin, and the broken stones still glowed with heat from the clash. Wind moved through the cracked rails, carrying ash across the narrow path, while the fast river below kept rushing as if nothing in the world had changed. Kaito stood near the center of the bridge with torn sleeves, worn boots, and tired gray eyes that no longer looked empty. He was a young man with black hair and a guarded face, but now his posture held more strength than before. Above him, the living crown floated in black and gold soul light, shifting like fractured glass in fire, and it pulsed each time he steadied himself. Beside him stood Aria, a young woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, and an elegant battle outfit with white armor plates and a dark blue cloak. She still carried herself like someone proud and careful, but the shock in her face had not left since she saw how far Victor would go. Mina, a quiet young woman with brown hair and a small frame, stayed close with nervous hands gripping her travel cloak. Ben, a broad young man with black hair and heavy boots, watched the far side of the bridge with a stubborn stare. Alina, a woman with red hair and a tired, warm face, kept one hand on her healer supplies while she looked from face to face, ready to help anyone who faltered. They were not a grand army and they were not safe yet, but they had chosen each other, and that choice mattered more than any title Victor had ever worn. Kaito understood the danger now in a simple way. If they failed to reach the capital, Victor would control the story forever, and the truth would be buried under polished lies. If they reached the capital with proof, then the judges, the nobles, and even the frightened people in the streets would have to listen. That was why the bridge mattered, and that was why Victor had struck here first. On the far side, Lord Victor stood with the same stiff control that had made him so hard to read from the beginning. He was a man with steel gray hair, sharp eyes, pale skin, and a formal royal judge outfit trimmed in heavy gold. His high collar stayed perfect even in the smoke, and his expression held the cold pride of someone who believed rank should always win over truth. Yet now his calm had a crack in it. He had expected fear, confusion, and surrender, but Kaito had crossed his first wall and exposed a piece of his lie. Victor did not hate truth just because he was cruel. He feared it because truth could destroy the order he had built around himself. Long before this night, he had climbed through the court by blaming others, hiding mistakes, and using the law like a blade. The living crown was part of that fear. Victor knew the crown did not simply protect a person with power. It reacted to pain, pressure, and honest resolve, turning harm into momentum when its bearer endured and kept moving. That rule made the crown dangerous to men like him because the more they tried to crush the one who carried it, the stronger that person could become. Victor had learned that from old records, and he had spent years making sure no one else understood it. So when Kaito awakened the crown on the bridge, Victor saw more than a threat. He saw the risk of his whole story falling apart in front of the kingdom. That was why he sent Thorn forward again, because Thorn could do what Victor himself could not do in public. Thorn was a broad demon commander with dark red hair, horned black armor, glowing yellow eyes, and a cruel smile that never seemed to fade. His torn battle cloak still smoked from the earlier conflict, but he moved with calm confidence as if the bridge belonged to him. He wanted one simple thing: more chaos, more fear, and more space for Victor to tighten control. His motive was clear even to the others. The more broken the land became, the easier it was for a force like his to feed on fear and serve a master who rewarded cruelty. He raised one arm and dark pressure rolled forward again, not to kill the group, but to scatter them, isolate them, and make sure none of them reached the capital with a clean story. The attack came fast and the bridge answered with sound. Loose stones jumped under the force, the cracked rails shook, and the river below flashed silver in the moonlight. Aria moved first, drawing her strength into a controlled stance. She was not following Kaito because she had no pride left. She was following him because she had seen the cost of blind loyalty, and deep inside she no longer trusted the simple lessons of the academy the same way. Her calm voice cut through the fear as she told the others to stay behind her. Mina stepped in beside her, not as a fighter, but as someone who could keep people from breaking apart. Mina had always believed truth mattered more than rank, and now that belief gave her steady hands. She called out the places where the bridge was weakest so Ben would not step there by mistake. Ben, who hated cruel power and wanted to protect people instead of obeying it, charged forward with a practical shield and planted himself against the first wave of force. Elena moved behind him, ready to support anyone who got pushed back, her warm face tight with focus as she wrapped torn cloth around a scraped arm and told the injured to breathe and keep moving. Kaito felt the living crown flare above him when the pressure hit his chest. Pain passed through him, but instead of forcing him down, it sharpened his focus and fed his next step. The crown brightened, its black and gold edges flashing, and he understood another part of its rule. The crown did not reward anger, it rewarded endurance. It answered when a person chose to keep going while carrying pain for the sake of others. That truth changed Kaito in the middle of the fight. He was no longer just trying to survive Victor. He was beginning to lead people through Victor. He lifted his head, locked eyes with Thorn, and moved forward with a steadier stride than before. The clash that followed was fierce, but it was not random. Thorn tried to overwhelm the group with weight and fear, while Kaito pushed through each air of pressure, using the crown to turn impact into speed and balance. Aria saw the pattern first, and her shock turned into regret. She realized she had once trusted Victor because he looked proper and safe, while Kaito, who looked worn and weak, had been telling the truth from the start. That realization hurt her because it meant she had helped protect a lie, yet instead of freezing, she changed. She shifted her blade, covered Kaito's side, and chose to trust what she could now see with her own eyes. The bridge battle reached its sharpest point when Thorn tried a final push near the broken center span. He wanted to split the group in two and trap them on opposite sides of the gap. Victor watched from behind him with cold patience, ready to use the confusion as proof that Kaito was a danger to the realm. But the living crown rose higher above Kaito, and its glow spread across the smoke like a warning sign. Kaito finally understood that Victor had not only framed him through the court. Victor had also buried stories about the crown itself, because if the people learned how it truly worked, they would see how often Victor had forced pain onto others to keep power for himself. The twist landed hard in Kaito's mind. The crown was not a secret weapon given to a chosen noble. It was a test, and it chose the person who could carry truth through suffering without turning cruel. That was why Victor never wanted it studied. He had used the court to hide the rule, and he had used fear to keep the people from asking why so many honest voices disappeared into silence. Kaito did not waste time on anger. He He stepped forward and took the next air of force head-on, letting the crown drink in the impact. Then he pushed back with a burst of momentum that drove Thorn to retreat several steps. Ben shouted and slammed his shield into the stone to hold the line. Aria struck with precise force and forced the demon commander off balance. Elena pulled Mina away from a collapsing stone edge and kept her steady. The entire group moved like one body for the first time, and that made Victor's careful plan begin to fail. Thorn's cruel smile faded as he realized the fight was no longer scattering the group. It was uniting them. Victor then made a choice that showed his real fear. He did not call for a final strike. He ordered a retreat. That order said everything. He had not come to win the bridge forever. He had come to test Kaito, to measure how far the crown had awakened, and to see whether the group would break apart under pressure. Now he had his answer, and it clearly troubled him. As he withdrew into the smoke, he looked not like a man in control, but like a man protecting a secret that could not survive daylight. When the bridge finally grew still, the group stood on the same side of the gap, tired but unbroken. The smoke hung low, and the dark road to the capital waited beyond the stones like a long promise and a long warning. Kaito lowered his arms slowly, and the living crown dimmed above him, but it did not vanish. It remained there, close and alive, as if it had accepted him for now. Aria walked toward him with a new kind of silence. Her proud face had changed, and regret now sat beside respect. She told him in a voice that was no longer sharp that she should have believed him sooner. Kaito did not answer with anger. He had no room for that anymore. He had seen too much, and he understood that blame would not carry them to the capital. What mattered now was what they did next. Mina explained that the first village on the road would be a dangerous place to stop, because Victor had eyes everywhere and could spread lies faster than they could travel. Ben agreed, and he said the capital would not listen unless they arrived with proof and witnesses who could not be ignored. Elena checked everyone one more time, then reminded them that their bodies were not as ready as their hearts, so they had to move smart and stay together. Kaito looked at each of them, and for the first time he did not see helpers standing behind him. He saw people choosing the same hard road for their own reasons, and that changed him deeply. He was no longer the weak boy trying to prove he belonged. He had become the one who could carry the weight of others without losing himself. Behind the bridge, Victor was already planning his next move, and ahead of them the capital waited with closed gates, careful judges, and more lies hidden behind polished walls. Yet now Kaito knew something he had not known before. The truth did not need to be perfect to be powerful. It only needed people brave enough to carry it forward. So he turned toward the long road, and the others followed, while the dark wind of the river rose behind them, and the first real break in Victor's wall began to matter more than anyone on the bridge had dared hope. The road away from the river was long, cold, and quiet, and the sky above it had the same dark color as wet stone. Behind them, the river bridge stood like a broken line across the water, with wind still cutting through its cracked rails. Kaito walked at the front with his torn academy sleeves moving in the breeze, his black hair messy, and his tired gray eyes fixed ahead. He looked weak to anyone who did not know him, but his shoulders had changed after the bridge, because now he carried something heavier than fear. Mina stayed close behind him, a young woman with brown hair, a small frame, nervous hands, and a simple travel cloak over plain village clothes. She had little voice, but her courage came from a deep place, and she believed that truth mattered more than rank. Ben walked near her, a young man with black hair, a broad build, heavy boots, and a stubborn face that always looked ready for trouble. He wanted to protect people who could not protect themselves, and that made him dangerous to every cruel ruler in the kingdom. Elena followed with careful steps, a woman with red hair, a tired but warm face, and a torn healer robe over dark traveling clothes. She carried simple supplies, and she hated injustice because she had seen too many hurt people ignored by powerful men. Ahead of them, the capital waited behind closed gates, careful judges, and polished lies, while Lord Victor still sat inside his wall and pretended the truth could be buried forever. That was the real danger now, because if Victor won, the bridge would have meant nothing, and every person who had trusted Kaito would be crushed back into silence. They did not get far before the first patrol appeared on the road. 4 city guards came out of the mist, each wearing gray armor and narrow helms, and each carrying orders from the capital to stop travelers who looked like trouble. The captain was a man named Owen, broad-shouldered and strict, with dark brown hair and a hard mouth that never softened. He was not cruel in the way Victor was cruel, but he feared his own masters, and fear had made him obedient. Owen raised one hand and told them to halt, then asked for names, papers, and reasons for travel. Kaito answered in a steady voice and said they were carrying proof that Victor had lied about the bridge attack and the arrests that followed. That made the guards tense because even rumor was enough to unsettle a city built on careful lies. Owen asked for the proof, and Kaito showed only a small folded page from the bridge records, the one torn section that named the judge who had signed the false order. It was not enough to clear everything, but it was enough to wound the story Victor had built. The captain looked at the page, then at Kaito, and for a moment his hard face changed. He knew that one false paper could begin a bigger fire, and he also knew that the capital had been hiding too much for too long. Before he could decide, a cold shadow moved across the road, and everyone felt it before they saw it. Thorn arrived without hurry, a broad demon commander with dark red hair, horned black armor, glowing yellow eyes, and a cruel smile that made the air feel smaller. His heavy battle cloak was torn and smoky, and he moved with calm confidence as if the world had already chosen his side. He did not attack at once. Instead, he spoke to Owen and said the city did not need more doubt because doubt made people weak and weak people caused disorder. His motive was simple and brutal. Victor wanted control and Thorn wanted the kingdom open to chaos so his dark force could feed on fear and collapse the order that stood in his way. Owen froze because he understood that both sides could destroy him, and that was when Kaito stepped forward not to boast, but to stand between the guards and the demon commander. The living crown rose above his head then, black and gold soul light shifting like fractured glass in fire, its sharp edges glowing brighter with every pulse of his heart. Thorn struck first, not with a blade, but with a heavy wave of dark pressure that slammed into Kaito and threw him backward across the road. The impact should have broken his spirit, but the crown flared instead, and the pain turned into force that pushed him back up. Kaito came to his feet faster than anyone expected, and his eyes sharpened with a new focus. He understood something in that moment. The crown did not protect him from pain. It used pain as fuel, and every hit could make him stronger if he did not let fear take control. Thorn saw that and smiled wider because now the game had become interesting. The clash that followed was fast and harsh, but it stayed clean and bloodless, as all such battles must in a world still worth saving. Thorn moved with great power, each step shaking loose stones on the road, and Kaito answered with growing force, every strike against him making the crown burn brighter above his head. Ben rushed in to help and drove one guard aside with his shield arm, while Mina shouted warnings and pulled Alina away from flying debris. Alina, even while frightened, kept her hands ready for anyone who needed help, because she had chosen mercy even on a dangerous road. Aria arrived during the fight, and her entrance changed the air around them. She was a young woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, an elegant academy battle outfit with white armor plates, a dark blue cloak, fitted gloves, and a calm but proud face that now carried a sharp edge of doubt. She had come from the capital on orders to observe the road, but the sight before her shattered what she thought she knew. She saw Kaito standing against Thorn, saw the guards hesitating, and saw the page from the bridge records in Owen of the gray armor capped in hands. More than that, she saw the living crown, and she felt a cold shock at its shape, because she recognized its old form from forbidden lessons buried deep inside academy memory. For a brief moment, she remembered Victor speaking about dangerous relics that turned suffering into power, and she realized with horror that he had not only feared the crown, he had helped hide it. That was the twist hidden beneath his lies. Victor had not simply wanted to punish Kaito. He had wanted to keep the crown away from the public, because if people learned that pain could awaken power, then his story about noble control and perfect order would fall apart. Aria had once believed Victor was protecting the city from chaos, but now she saw that he was protecting his own rule. Her proud face shifted into regret and shock, and that change mattered more than any wound on the road. She called out for Thorn to stop, but he only laughed and pushed harder, trying to overwhelm Kaito before the others could understand what was happening. Then Kaito made his choice. Instead of fighting only to win, he fought to create a path. He let the next uda air, the next hard blow, the next burst of pressure strike him squarely, and the crown answered with a bright flash that split Thorn of his footing and forced the demon commander back several steps. The guard stared, Owen stared, Aria stared. In that moment, the road itself seemed to pause because the weak boy everyone had overlooked now stood in the middle of the lane with light rising over his head and truth spreading faster than fear. When the clash ended, Thorn did not retreat because he was defeated forever, but because the moment had turned against him. He pulled back with a slow grin and promised that the capital would swallow Kaito whole, because Victor still had judges, gates, and loyal hands inside the walls. Then he vanished into the dark wind from the river, leaving behind broken dust and a deeper silence. Owen lowered his hand at last and said nothing for a long moment, because he now understood that the city had been feeding him lies. He let Kaito and the others pass, and that small choice mattered more than a loud speech could have. As they moved on, Aria walked beside them instead of behind them. She did not fully trust herself yet, and she did not ask for forgiveness because she had not earned it. Instead, she said the truth in a low voice. Victor had ordered her to watch Kaito from the start, not because Kaito was a criminal, but because the crown answered to him, and Victor feared what would happen if the kingdom learned that the old power had awakened again. That admission hit Kaito hard, not because it surprised him completely, but because it confirmed how deep the lie had grown. Still, he did not turn away from Aria. He saw her regret, and he saw that she had chosen to speak now when silence would have been safer. That made her dangerous to Victor and useful to the truth, and Kaito knew that both could matter. Mina asked if the capital would still close its gates against them. Ben said the judges would probably try. Elena said people inside the walls were already hurting, and the right words might help them wake up. Kaito listened to all of them, and for the first time since the bridge, he did not feel like a boy carrying one impossible burden. He felt like the center of a small and growing line. The living crown still floated above him, black and gold light turning slowly in the cold air, brighter now than before, as if it approved of his choice. He understood then that its power did not make him a hero by itself. It only gave shape to what was already inside him, the will to stand up again and again without becoming cruel. By sunset, the capital walls were visible at last, tall and pale against the darkening sky, and the gates still stood closed. Yet the road behind Kaito no longer felt empty. The first crack in Victor's wall had widened into a real break, and people were already whispering the story along the road, one careful word at a time. Kaito kept walking, Aria at his side, Mina and Ben and Elena close behind, while somewhere beyond the gates Victor waited with his judges and his polished lies. Kaito did not know exactly how the next part would begin, only that the truth had crossed the bridge, and now it was moving toward the capital like fire through dry grass, patient, bright, and impossible to ignore. The road toward the capital ran beneath a cold gray sky, and the wind kept pushing dust across the stones like a warning that would not leave. On one side of the road stood dark fields and broken fence posts, and on the other side waited steep hills that looked quiet but felt uneasy. Kaito walked at the front with his torn sleeves moving in the wind, his tired gray eyes fixed ahead, while Aria stayed near him with her silver hair shining softly under the dull light. Behind them came Mina, Ben, and Elena, each one carrying a different kind of worry, and each one knowing that the broken wall behind them had already become a real story in the mouths of travelers. The truth had crossed the bridge, but the capital was still trying to act like nothing had happened. That was the danger now. If Victor reached the judges first, he could twist the story, stain Kaito with doubt, and make the whole city believe that power mattered more than truth. Kaito did not say that fear out loud, but everyone in the group could feel it. They were not just walking toward a city anymore. They were walking toward a fight for the heart of that city. Mina was the first to break the silence, because quiet people often carry the sharpest thoughts. She was a young woman with brown hair, a small frame, nervous hands, and a simple travel cloak over plain village clothes, and she had joined Kaito because she believed truth mattered more than rank. She looked back toward the road behind them and whispered that people at the bridge had been speaking in low voices, as if the words themselves might be punished. Ben, a broad young man with black hair, a stubborn face, a leather vest, and heavy boots, gave a short nod and said that fear always moved faster than horses when nobles started lying. He followed Kaito because he wanted to protect people instead of obeying cruel power, and that made him simple in the best way, because he never hid what he meant. Elena, a woman with red hair, a tired but warm face, and a torn healer robe over dark traveling clothes, said the city guards would try to close the road if Victor felt threatened. She cared for the wounded and hated injustice, and she understood something the others only feared. A lie did not need to be true to become useful. It only needed enough people to repeat it. Aria heard all of this and said nothing at first. She had silver hair, bright blue eyes, an elegant academy battle outfit with white armor plates, a dark blue cloak, fitted gloves, and a calm but proud face that had begun to crack under regret. She had once believed rank and training could solve everything, but the events at the bridge had shown her that pride could make a person blind at the worst time. Kaito glanced at her once and she lowered her eyes because she knew she had doubted him when he needed trust most. The mistake had not broken her yet, but it had changed her, and the pain of that change was written plainly across her face. They had reached the first guard post before noon, and that was where the road began to tighten. 2 city guards stood beside a wooden barrier, and a third waited on a raised platform with a horn in his hand, ready to call for help if needed. The guards wore gray armor and short formal capes, and their leader was Owen, a broad man with dark brown hair, a strict face, and the hard look of someone who had spent years obeying orders that did not always sit right in his chest. He was the captain of the road patrol, and he was torn between following the capital and following what he knew was right. When he saw Kaito approach, he raised one hand and ordered the group to stop. His voice was firm but not cruel. He said he had received word that a dangerous disturbance had broken out at the bridge, and that the group might be carrying stolen records, false reports, or even cursed objects hidden under travel cloaks. At the mention of cursed objects, the living crown above Kaito answered with a faint pulse of black and gold light. It floated just above his head, looking like fractured glass and fire combined, with sharp glowing edges that brightened whenever he took impact or pain and turned it into momentum. Owen noticed the strange light at once, and the other guards stepped back. Kaito knew then that the crown was not just reacting to hurt. It was listening, learning, and pressing him forward with every threat. That made him both stronger and more exposed. Owen asked Kaito where the crown had come from, and Kaito answered honestly that he did not fully know. He said only that it had awakened when Victor tried to bury the truth. That answer made the guards uneasy, because the road captain could see that Kaito was not speaking like a trickster. He was speaking like a person who had been pushed too far and had found something inside himself that could not be put back to sleep. Owen told them to wait while he checked the message seal from the capital, but before he could leave, a runner arrived from the west road with a torn sash and mud on his boots. He gasped that more travelers were already repeating the story of the bridge, and that Victor had sent word ahead claiming Kaito was a dangerous traitor using dark power to attack honest judges. The lie had moved faster than the truth, just as Kaito feared, and now the road itself was becoming part of the battle. That was when the first real twist cut through the day. Owen opened the message seal, and his strict face changed in a way that no one missed. The message from the capital did not only order Kaito arrested. It also ordered Owen to turn away any witnesses who tried to speak in Kaito's favor, no matter how clean their evidence seemed. Worse still, the seal carried the signature of a man who should have known better, one of Victor's trusted legal advisors, a man named Salas, who had once worked beside the bridge inspection office and had access to the old support records. That meant the break at the wall had not been a simple accident or a lucky lie. It had been prepared, guided, and protected by people who understood the road system well enough to hide their fingerprints. Alina immediately understood the meaning. The wall had not widened on its own. Someone had planned for it to fail at just the right moment, so the resulting panic could be blamed on Kaito and used to quiet the judges before they could ask the wrong questions. Aria looked shocked because the shape of the lie was suddenly larger than she had imagined. It was not only Victor wanting to protect his name. It was Victor building a whole net of control around the truth before it could reach the capital. Ben clenched his fists and demanded to know who would do such a thing, and Owen answered with a tired look that said he had guessed the answer long ago, but had never wanted to speak it aloud. Victor feared not only shame, but exposure. If the judges learned that the bridge records had been altered, then they would ask why the repairs were rushed, why the support stone had been replaced, and why the money for safe work had vanished. That could ruin Victor's authority, but more than that, it could reveal that he had used public fear to climb higher in the city. Kaito listened, and the living crown grew brighter above him, as if it drew strength from each honest piece of the story. He felt it not as comfort, but as pressure. The crown was asking him to carry more than anger, it was asking him to carry proof. Owen made his choice in that moment, and the choice mattered because he was not a brave fool. He was a careful man, and careful people change the world only when the truth becomes heavier than their fear. He ordered the barrier lifted just enough for Kaito and his group to pass, but he also warned them that other patrols would not be so open. He said Victor had already sent riders to the east and south roads, and that anyone carrying the bridge story could be stopped, searched, or dragged back to the capital for questioning. He did not say more, but his eyes flicked once toward Aria, and Kaito understood that even respected names could be trapped by victor influence. The group moved on, but the road ahead felt narrower than before. The sky darkened and the first drops of rain began to fall, turning the dust into slick mud under their boots. Kaito walked faster because the crown above him grew restless whenever delay threatened to slow him down. Mina stumbled once and Kaito caught her elbow without thinking. She gave him a grateful smile, and that small moment reminded him why he had kept going through so many hard steps. He was not fighting for pride. He was fighting for people who would be crushed if powerful men got to write every story. Far behind them, a horn sounded from the guard post, then another from the hills, and all at once the air felt full of movement. Someone was coming. Owen had been right, the other patrols were already on the road. Aria lifted her head, her bright blue eyes sharp again, and Ben stepped forward beside Kaito with his shoulders square. Elena tightened the strap of her medicine bag. Mina drew a careful breath and stood her ground. Then, from the mist ahead, riders began to appear, their gray capes dark with rain, and their lead rider raised a hand to command the road to stop. Kaito did not yet know whether they had come to arrest him, silence him, or test him. He only knew that the next moment would decide whether the truth kept moving, or whether Victor finally closed his hand around it. The living crown flashed above Kaito with a hard black and gold pulse, and Kaito felt the pain in his tired body turn into a steady new force. He took one step forward, then another, while the riders closed in through the rain, and the road held its breath for the clash that was about to begin. Rain kept falling over the empty road, and the night felt heavy enough to press against the skin. River Bridge stood ahead like a broken line of stone, with cracked rails, loose blocks, and cold wind cutting through the dark. Kaito stood on that road with wet hair stuck to his forehead, torn sleeves hanging from his plain academy uniform, and gray eyes that had already seen too much. The living crown floated above him, black and gold light shifting like broken glass and fire, and everyone there could feel that this was no longer just a chase. This was the moment when Victor would either seize the truth or lose it forever. Kaito knew that if he fell here, the last safe path for the truth would close behind him. Aria had come with him because she had once trusted rank more than doubt, and now she wanted to see the truth with her own eyes. Mina had come because she believed honesty mattered more than fear, even when her hands shook. Ben had come because he refused to let cruel people decide who was worth protecting. Elena had come because wounded people did not matter to Victor, and that made her angry in a quiet, steady way. Behind them, Owen, the captain of the road patrol, watched with a strict face and a troubled heart, because he had begun to understand that orders from the capital did not always mean justice. Near him stood Silas, neat and calm in his polished legal advisor clothes, with dark hair and narrow eyes that hid every feeling behind careful words. And now, through the rain, Victor sent his riders forward, and with them came Thorn, the demon commander with dark red hair, glowing yellow eyes, and black armor marked by horned edges. Thorn moved with cruel calm, as if he already knew how the night would end. Victor wanted Kaito captured because Kaito had become a living threat to the lies around the crown and the old royal record. If Kaito could speak freely, then the story Victor had built would crack open in public, and his power would weaken. That was the real danger. That was why the road had turned into a trap. The first rider charged hard, splashing through the rain with a spear lowered and boots striking stone. Kaito stepped forward instead of back, and the living crown answered with a sharp pulse that made his tired body feel suddenly clear. The pain in his shoulder, his ribs, and his legs did not vanish, but it changed into force that moved through him like a steady current. He raised one hand, and when the rider swung in, Kaito shifted just enough to break the line of attack. The impact sent sparks of black and gold light across the wet road. A second rider came from the side, trying to surround him, and Ben rushed in with a heavy shoulder check that drove the man off balance and sent him stumbling into the mud. Ben was broad, stubborn, and practical, and he fought like a man who wanted every innocent person behind him to live another day. Mina stayed close to the broken stones near the bridge edge, watching the dark line of riders and whispering warnings when she saw movement. She was small and careful, but her eyes missed almost nothing. Elena crouched beside a fallen patrolman, her red hair damp and her healer supplies held tight in one hand, ready to help anyone who was injured no matter what badge they wore. Aria moved with smooth, sharp control, her silver hair flashing in the rain as she blocked one rider and forced him to retreat with a clean strike from her battle blade. But even as they pushed back the first wave, the pressure kept growing. Thorn did not rush, he only lifted one hand and smiled, and that smile made the riders spread wider as if they were pulling a net around Kaito and his friends. Then his voice cut through the rain with a low, rough edge. He said Kaito did not understand the weight of the crown because the crown was never meant for someone weak. He said truth was only useful when it stayed in the hands of rulers. That was the lie Victor always used, and Thorn repeated it like a soldier reciting a lesson. But his motive was clear, and that made him more dangerous. He did not just want to win a fight. He wanted to prove that power belonged only to the strongest force in the room and that everyone else should kneel. Victor had promised Thorn freedom and authority if the riders succeeded tonight, and Thorn cared more about reward than honor. That explained why he fought with such cold confidence. He was not simply an enemy in the rain. He was a man who had chosen his side for the sake of power. Then Aria saw something that made her face change. One of the riders wore a signet band with the same seal used by Victor's inner court, but the man beneath it was not a common guard. He was a palace runner, one of the messengers who should have been nowhere near a roadside arrest. Aria looked at Silas, and Silas looked away too quickly. That small motion revealed more than any speech could hide. Aria understood at once that this was not a normal capture. Victor had not only sent soldiers, he had sent a legal trap. Silas had drawn up papers to make the seizure look lawful after the fact, so anyone who questioned it could be told that Kaito had resisted a proper arrest. The truth was being attacked from both sides, with steel in the rain and ink in the palace. Aria felt shock twist through her calm face because she had once trusted the rules of the academy and the crown. Now she could see that those rules had been bent into a tool for silence. She moved towards Silas, demanding answers, and his controlled mask finally cracked just enough to show fear. He said nothing at first, but his silence confirmed everything. Owen saw it too. The captain looked from the riders to the forged papers in Silas's hand, and then to Kaito standing under the pulse of the living crown. Owen had obeyed Victor for years because he thought order kept people safe. But now he saw that order could also become a cage. His strict face tightened, and he ordered his patrol to hold their line and stop the riders from surrounding the bridge. That choice mattered because once Owen turned, the road no longer belonged to Victor alone. Still, the danger had not passed. Thorn raised his weapon and shouted for the next wave to push harder, and the bridge began to shake under the running boots and clashing steel. Kaito realized then that the crown was reacting to more than pain. It was responding to his will. Every time he chose to stand, it grew brighter. Every time he protected someone else, the black and gold light sharpened. That was the hidden rule, and it had been there from the start. The living crown did not feed on anger. It fed on resolve. It turned suffering into motion only when the person wearing it refused to break. That was why Victor feared it. A tool like that could not be controlled by a proud ruler who only wanted obedience. The battle shifted when Thorn stepped in himself. He moved with heavy, practiced confidence, and every footstep made the wet stones seem to groan. His horned black armor caught the lightning glow, and his yellow eyes fixed on Kaito like a hunter measuring a cornered animal. He told Kaito that Victor did not need him alive if he chose the wrong side. The line was meant to frighten him, but the words landed differently because everyone there had learned by now that Victor feared what Kaito knew. That meant Kaito was not just being hunted, he was being tested because whoever understood the crown could threaten the whole structure of Victor's rule. Thorn swung once and Kaito was forced back 3 steps. The impact ran through his arm and into his chest, but the crown flashed brighter and turned that shock into forward force. Kaito came back in with a clean counter, not stronger than Thorn yet, but sharper than before. He was learning in the middle of the storm. Mina called out from the side of the road that the riders had left a gap near the bridge rail. Ben saw it too and drove 2 soldiers away from the opening, gritting his teeth as he protected the path. Alina pulled a young guard to safety and shouted that they were all being used, which made one of the riders hesitate for the first time. That hesitation mattered. It showed that Victor's grip was not perfect. Aria, still stunned by Silas's lies, finally made her choice. She turned on the palace advisor and told him that if Victor wanted a false arrest, then the whole city would one day learn how fake his justice really was. Silas backed away, and for a brief moment his perfect calm looked like fear of being seen. Then, just as Kaito seemed ready to push back Thorn again, the living crown sent a new pulse through his mind. It was not a voice but a clear image, and it showed him a memory that was not his own. He saw a chamber under the palace, sealed with black stone, and inside it stood another crown fragment like the one above him. Beside it stood Victor, younger but already cold, speaking to someone in shadow. Victor had known about the living crown long before Kaito touched it. He had not discovered it by chance. He had hunted it. He had once tried to use its power, but the crown had rejected him because he feared pain and could only think about control. That was the twist hidden under all the lies. Victor did not want Kaito arrested only to protect the realm. He wanted Kaito stopped because Kaito had become the first person the crown had accepted, and Victor could not allow that truth to spread. Kaito understood now that the living crown was not a prize. It was a judgment. It chose the one who could keep moving even when everything hurts, and Victor, for all his gold and authority, had already failed that test long before tonight. The rain fell harder and the bridge groaned again as the fight reached its highest point. Thorn lunged for the living crown itself, trying to break the strange light above Kaito, but Aria intercepted him with a fierce strike that forced him back. Her silver hair clung to her face, and her pride had changed into something deeper now, something much closer to regret. She had once looked at Kaito as if he were only a problem to be managed. Now she saw that he had been carrying a burden that no one else had understood. That realization hurt her, and it also made her stronger. Owen ordered his patrol to form a wall near the bridge entrance, and for the first time that night, Victor's riders were the ones losing ground. Sailors, seeing the tide turn, tried to pull back with the forged papers still hidden in his coat, but Mina spotted him and shouted a warning. Ben cut off his escape path, and Silas had to drop the papers into the river wind rather than let them be seized. They spun over the side and vanished into the dark water, which was not the same as justice, but it was enough to keep them from being used tonight. Thorn stared at Kaito with open hatred now because the battle had stopped being easy. Kaito stood straighter than before, his tired body still hurt, but his eyes were no longer empty or guarded. They were steady. He told Thorn, and words carried through the rain, that Victor could send riders, judges, and lies, but he could not own the truth forever. The living crown flared above Kaito with a hard black and gold burst, and the road around him seemed to answer. Thorn was driven back several steps, not broken, but forced to retreat for the moment. Victor's plan had not fully failed because his grip was still strong in the city, and his next move was surely already forming behind palace walls. But tonight had changed the shape of the struggle. Kaito had stood his ground and learned the rule of the crown. Aria had seen the lie inside the law. Owen had begun to choose truth over command, and even in retreat, Thorn knew this road was no longer under Victor alone. As the rain swallowed the bridge and the riders pulled back into the dark, Kaito kept his eyes on the path ahead, because he knew this was only one battle in a larger war, and the truth was still moving forward. Rain still fell over the river bridge, but the storm had lost its roar, and now it sounded more like a warning than a wall. The broken stones of the bridge glistened under cold moonlight, while the river below rushed black and fast through the dark. On one side stood Kaito, a slim young man with black hair, tired gray eyes, and torn sleeves hanging from his plain academy uniform. The living crown floated above him, a shifting ring of black and gold soul light that pulsed like fractured glass and fire. Beside him stood Aria, a young woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, and a white armored battle outfit under a dark blue cloak, her calm face now marked by shock and regret. Behind them waited Mina, a small young woman with brown hair and nervous hands, Ben, a broad young man with black hair and a stubborn jaw, and Alina, a red-haired healer with a tired but warm face. They had crossed this bridge hoping to reach safety, but now the truth was clear. If Victor kept control of the road and the city gates, then every witness, every wounded traveler, and every honest guard would be trapped under his lies. That was why the bridge mattered, that was why this fight mattered. And that was why Kaito could not look away, even when his body still shook from the last clash. Owen stood at the far side of the bridge with his road patrol, his broad frame locked in gray armor and a formal cape that soaked up the rain. He had a strict face, but tonight that face looked torn in two. He had spent his life following orders, believing that law meant order and order meant peace. But he had seen Victor twist the law into a cage, and he had seen Aria recognize the lie inside it. So when his men raised their spears, Owen did not charge forward. He held them still. That small choice mattered more than any loud speech, because the men under him watched every breath he took. If their captain stepped toward truth, they could follow. If he stepped back, they would remain tools in Victor's hands. Owen looked at Kaito and then at Aria, and in his voice was the strain of a man breaking an old habit. He told them that Thorn had not retreated far, that the demon commander was regrouping with purpose, and that Silas had already sent word to the capital to seal the route and call Kaito a rebel. Silas was the other danger now, a neat-haired legal advisor with polished clothes and narrow eyes, the kind of man who never needed to raise his voice because he could bury truth in papers, seals, and false charges. Victor trusted Silas because Silas made lies look clean. That made him dangerous in a way that claws and armor could not match. Kaito listened, and the pain inside him sharpened into focus. The crown above him stirred as if it understood every word. He had already learned one rule of the crown during the bridge clash. It did not answer fear, it answered pressure. When pain struck him, the living crown drank that force and turned it into momentum, making him stronger the more he endured without giving in. But that rule also carried a cost, because the crown grew brighter when his body and heart were pushed harder. It wanted resistance, and it seemed to hunger for struggle. Kaito did not fully understand where it came from, only that it had chosen him in the middle of a world built on unfair rules. He had once thought strength was something a noble house owned and a common person borrowed. Now he knew strength could also be the courage to stand up again after being forced down. Aria noticed the change in him. She had once trusted Victor because his law sounded fair, and she had once thought Kaito was only a quiet academy boy with too little rank and too little power. But the bridge had broken her certainty. She saw that Victor did not protect order, he protected his own control. That realization hurt her more deeply than the rain because it meant she had defended the wrong side for too long. Then the next danger arrived from the dark road beyond the bridge. Thorn came back first, walking through the rain with calm steps, his dark red hair wet against horned black armor, his glowing yellow eyes fixed on Kaito with cruel interest. His torn battle cloak moved behind him like smoke. He did not rush because he did not need to. He was a demon commander who believed fear could do half the work before a blade ever moved. At his side marched a line of lesser fighters, their forms hidden by rain and shadow, each one carrying the pressure of the capital war behind them. Thorn said that Victor had no reason to fear the truth if the truth was weak, and that was why he wanted Kaito broken in public, in front of the road patrol, in front of Aria, and in front of every witness who might begin to doubt. His motive was simple and cold. If Kaito could be made to look like a threat, then Victor could tighten the law, silence questions, and turn the entire region into a controlled borderland. Thorn enjoyed the cruelty of it, but he also understood the logic. Fear made people obey, and obedience kept Victor safe. Kaito stepped forward anyway. The living crown flared above him, its black and gold edges splitting the rain into bright lines. He felt the old pain in his chest, the ache in his arms, the fatigue in his legs, and then he felt something new, a steady pulse that came from the choice to stand his ground. Ben moved to his left without being asked, planting his heavy boots in the wet stone like a shield. Mina stayed just behind them, her small hands clenched but her eyes firm as she watched the truth unfold. Elena crouched by the wounded guard who had been dragged back from the earlier clash, pressing simple bandages and calm words into action, because she knew the fight was not only about winning, but about keeping people alive long enough to see the truth. Aria raised her chin and stepped beside Kaito, and that single movement mattered too. She had once stood apart, proud and certain, but now she chose to stand with the one person Victor had tried hardest to isolate. Owen saw that choice and made his own. He lowered his spear line a little and told his patrol not to advance unless Thorn crossed the bridge. That was not full rebellion yet, but it was the first crack in Victor Wall. Thorn smiled when he saw the shift because he understood that cracks could become collapse if pushed at the right place. He signaled his fighters forward, but he did not charge all at once. Instead, he sent two of them to the far side rail where the stones had already loosened from the earlier clash. Their goal was not simply to attack. Their goal was to force the bridge into panic, so Owen would have to choose between breaking his own men or letting Kaito be overwhelmed. The tactic was smart, and it showed why Thorn mattered. He was not just a brute. He was a commander who knew how to use pressure, fear, and timing. Kaito saw the plan at once, and the crown above him shone brighter as the first strike came in. He took the impact on his shoulder and nearly slipped, but instead of falling apart, he felt the force flow through him like a strong current. The crown answered, pushing power into his stance. He drove back the first attacker, then the second, each movement cleaner than the last. Aria moved with him, her blade flashing in controlled arcs, not to kill, but to clear space and protect the wounded. Owen finally gave the order that changed everything. He told his patrol to stop Thorn from reaching the center span. That order did not make him a traitor in his own mind. It made him honest. The bridge became a battlefield of choices. Rain hit steel. Boots scraped wet stone. The patrol and the demon fighters collided in a hard, shifting line while Kaito kept pushing toward the center where Thorn waited with that same cold smile. Then Silas appeared at the edge of the road, dry under a dark cloak, as if he had arrived from the capital with the speed of a bad message. He held a sealed document high enough for everyone to see, and he shouted that Kaito had violated royal order, that Aria had aided a dangerous prisoner, and that Owen must restore control at once. The lie was crafted well, but Aria recognized the wording because it matched the same legal trap she had seen before. Silas had prepared this whole charge in advance, just waiting for the bridge to become messy enough to sell it. That was the revelation that cut through the storm. Victor had not simply reacted to Kaito. He had planned to turn the bridge into proof. Every attack, every retreat, every false claim was meant to make truth look like disorder. Aria felt anger rise through her shock because now she understood the real shape of the enemy. The fight was never only against demons. It was against a system that used demons, law, and fear together. Kaito saw that truth settle into everyone who still dared to look. Mina looked at Silas and then at the soldiers, and her nervous hands finally went still. Ben moved from defense to action, forcing back one raider and closing a gap that would have opened the line. Alina called out to the patrol that the wounded needed passage, not chains, and her clear voice made one of the younger guards hesitate before obeying Silas. Owen stood in the middle of that doubt, his strict face hardening into decision. He told Silas that the bridge was under his command, not the legal advisor hands, and that he would not let false papers turn him into a tool. Silas did not look shocked. He looked annoyed, which was worse because it meant he had already expected resistance. Thorn, seeing the line fail to break, raised one hand and began to pull his forces back in good order. He did not retreat because he had lost the day. He retreated because he had learned enough to make the next move sharper. Before leaving, he looked straight at Kaito and said that the crown had only begun to wake and that Victor would soon call in the deeper parts of his plan. Then he vanished into the rain with his fighters, while Silas slipped away behind him, taking the false order with him like a blade hidden in cloth. When the bridge finally went quiet, no one felt safe. The river still rushed below and the wind still cut across the broken rails, but the world had changed shape in a way no one could undo. Owen ordered his patrol to help the wounded and to hold the road instead of sealing it for Victor. Aria stayed beside Kaito, her pride now mixed with regret because she knew she had to face the harm done by her own trust. She asked Kaito where he had learned to keep standing, and he answered with simple honesty that he had not learned it alone. He had learned it from every person who refused to let cruelty speak for truth. That answer mattered because it showed the change inside him. He was no longer the boy who only endured. He was becoming someone who could carry others with him. The living crown still floated above his head, bright and unstable, but now its glow looked less like a curse and more like a warning. It would keep growing with pain, and that meant the next battle would be even harder. Far up the road, somewhere beyond the reach of the rain, Victor was already moving pieces into place. Kaito stared into that darkness, not with fear this time, but with steady resolve. The war had widened, the lie had been exposed, and the road ahead was still open. For now, that was enough because the truth was still moving forward, and so was he. The rain had softened by the time Kaito reached the edge of the lower road, but the sky still hung low and dark, pressing over the land like a heavy lid. Wet stones shone under the gray light, and every puddle reflected broken clouds and bent trees. Ahead of him stood the river bridge, long and narrow, with cracked rails and loose stones that made every step look risky. It was the only fast route toward the capital road, and that made it dangerous because Victor would know the same thing. Kaito understood that clearly now. If Victor controlled the bridge, he could choke the truth, trap the travelers, and keep the lie alive long enough to damage everyone who stood against him. That was why the crossing mattered, and that was why Kaito could not turn back. The living crown floated above his black hair with a faint black and gold pulse, like a warning flame that never stayed still. Its shape had changed since the last fight, and the rough glow now looked more alive, more alert, and more ready for pain. Kaito felt tired in his worn boots and torn uniform, yet his guarded face had hardened into quiet purpose. He was no longer waiting to be saved. He was moving to save others. Beside him walked Aria, a young woman with silver hair, bright blue eyes, and white armor plates over her battle outfit. Her dark blue cloak moved behind her in the wind, and her proud face held the kind of calm that came from training, rank, and a long habit of trust in the system. That trust had cracked before, and now it showed in the careful way she looked at Kaito. Mina followed close behind, a young woman with brown hair, a small frame, and nervous hands clutching the edge of her simple travel cloak. She was quiet, but she had a firm heart, and she believed truth mattered more than rank. Ben came next, a young man with black hair, a broad build, a leather vest, and heavy boots that struck the road with stubborn confidence. He wanted to protect people, not obey cruel power, and that had made him loyal to Kaito in a way that was simple and strong. Elena walked with them as well, a woman with red hair, a tired but warm face, and a healer robe worn over dark traveling clothes. She carried small bundles of supplies at her side because she cared about the wounded and hated injustice. The group did not speak for a moment because all of them could feel the weight of what was coming. Then Aria broke the silence with a low voice and said that the bridge would not be empty. Victor had guards on the road, and Silas, his careful advisor, had likely prepared a legal trap to make any resistance look like rebellion. Silas was a man with neat dark hair, narrow eyes, and polished clothing with expensive trim, and he mattered because he did not fight with a sword first. He fought with words, orders, and false rules that made lies seem legal. Victor valued status over heart, and Silas made that pride useful. That was the real danger because people obeyed what looked official. Mina swallowed hard and asked why Victor cared so much about one bridge. Elena answered first. She said the bridge was not just stone, it was a line of movement, a way for messengers, supplies, and witnesses to pass. If Victor sealed it, then his story stayed inside the capital while the truth stayed outside in the rain. Ben grunted and said that sounded exactly like the kind of cowardly plan Victor would use. Aria did not argue. Her bright blue eyes stayed fixed on the river ahead, and for the first time her proud face showed something close to regret. She had once believed the system would correct itself. Now she was learning that a broken system often protected the wrong people. That lesson hurt her, and Kaito could see it. He did not mock her for it. He only nodded because he knew change often began with shame. They moved onto the bridge in a tight line, with Kaito in front and the crown glowing above him. The river below rushed hard and dark, and the wind cut through the broken rails. Halfway across, they found the first sign that Victor had arrived before them. A row of city guards stood on the far side, gray armor catching the weak light, narrow helms down, patrol capes stiff with damp. In front of them stood Owen, the captain of the road patrol, a broad man with dark brown hair and a strict face. He looked like a man built to obey orders, but his eyes carried a deeper strain. He had heard the rumors. He had seen enough to doubt them. He wanted to keep the road safe, yet he also wanted to know whether he was serving justice or covering for a lie. Kaito stopped where the bridge stones turned uneven, and Owen lifted one hand in warning. He said the road was closed by royal order. His voice was careful, but not cruel. Victor, he said, had declared Kaito and his allies dangerous agitators who spread false stories and weakened public trust. Aria stiffened at once. She looked shocked, then angry, because the words were polished, neat, and false in all the ways that mattered. Mina trembled. Ben stepped forward, but Kaito raised one hand and held him back. The living crown flared when Kaito felt the pressure in the air, and the pulse brightened as if it understood the threat. Owen noticed that too. His eyes narrowed, and he asked Kaito quietly what the crown had done to him. Kaito answered with the truth, simple and direct. He said it had not chosen him because he was special. It had chosen him because he kept getting hurt and kept standing back up. He said it turned pain into momentum, and that was both a gift and a burden. That honesty changed the mood on the bridge. Owen lowered his hands slightly. He asked for proof, not because he wanted to block them, but because he wanted a reason to believe them. Then Silas appeared from behind the guard line, stepping forward with smooth control and a neat coat that looked dry despite the wet air around him. His dark hair was perfectly in place, and his expression was calm in the way of a man who enjoyed having the law on his side. He said Kaito had no right to move along the royal road because the crown had not passed any formal review. He said the living crown was unstable, dangerous, and likely linked to forbidden force. He said any witness who aided Kaito would be recorded as an accomplice. The trap was clear now. Silas was not only blocking the bridge, he was building a paper wall around the truth, making fear look like duty. Kaito felt the crown lift higher and the glow sharpened. He understood the simple trick inside the lie. Silas was betting that people would be more afraid of punishment than of injustice. For a moment, it seemed the whole bridge had fallen into that fear. Then Alina stepped forward with a tired but steady voice. She pulled out records from the healer bundle she carried, and she explained that the villagers hurt by Victor's men had been denied aid, then blamed for their own suffering. Mina added that she had seen the message routes altered. Ben said he had watched supplies vanish before reaching the farms. Aria, still shaken, admitted that she had served under rules she no longer trusted. Each truth landed like a stone. Owen listened, and his strict face changed. He was not a soft man, but he was an honest one, and honesty had finally reached him. He turned to Silas and asked why the orders never mentioned the missing supplies. Silas answered too quickly. He said those details were not relevant. That was the mistake. Owen heard the lie inside the answer. The captain stepped back, then lifted his hand and ordered his guards to wait. That single moment broke Victor's perfect control, and the bridge filled with a tense silence. But the silence did not last. A deep rumble rolled across the river, and black smoke rose beyond the far bank. Thorn had arrived. The demon commander stood in horned black armor with torn battle cloak and glowing yellow eyes, his dark red hair wet from the rain and his cruel smile easy to see even from a distance. He did not rush like a beast. He moved with calm confidence because he knew fear could do more damage than speed. His motive was not random chaos. He wanted the road open only when it served Victor, because Victor had promised him access, supplies, and a chance to crush the resistance in one clean sweep. Thorn raised one hand and shadowed force struck the bridge supports, not to destroy everything but to drive the guards into panic and make Kaito look responsible. The stone underfoot shook. One rail snapped. Guards stumbled. Owen shouted for order, but his voice was swallowed by the blast of panic. Ben rushed to help two guards steady themselves. Mina grabbed Alina before she slipped on the wet stone. Aria drew closer to Kaito, and for the first time she did not stand as a proud observer. She stood as a partner. Kaito felt the crown ignite brighter, and pain shot through him as the bridge shuddered under his boots. The pain did not break him. It fed the crown, and the crown answered with a harder, sharper glow. He understood then that Victor had planned for the crown to make him look like a monster, because every time Kaito endured an air, the weapon above him became harder to ignore. That was the twist hidden inside the warning. The thing that looked like a curse was also a signal, and now the signal was calling them into the next fight. Kaito stepped forward through the shaking bridge, and the crown flared like broken fire above his head. Owen saw the move and chose at last. He shouted for his guards to protect the travelers instead of arresting them. Silas snapped in shock, and Thorn's smile widened with cold delight because the trap had lost control. The bridge was not safe, the road was not clear, and Victor was still far ahead, moving pieces into place. But now Kaito had allies on both sides of the lie, and that changed everything. As the wind tore across the stones and the river roared below, Kaito looked past Thorn, past Silas, and toward the distant road to the capital. He was still tired, he was still hurt, yet his expression no longer carried doubt. It carried resolve. The truth had crossed the river with him, and the war had grown wider than Victor expected. That meant the next step would be harder, but it also meant the enemy could no longer hide behind a single story. Kaito tightened his grip, lifted his chin, and moved forward as the living crown blazed above him, ready to turn the next blow into the next answer. The road was open for one more breath, and he would use it well. The bridge shook under the wind, and the cold river below kept rushing hard. Kaito stood at the center with torn sleeves, sore shoulders, and the living crown burning above him. Behind him came Mina, Ben, and Alina, each one tired, each one still moving because the truth now mattered more than fear. Ahead waited Lord Victor, and beside him stood Silas, his neat dark hair untouched by the dust, his calm face hiding the lies that had kept the city blind. Victor raised one hand and ordered the guards to close the road. He wanted Kaito taken away before more people could hear the truth, because the truth would ruin his control. Silas spoke softly, like a careful man, and told the guards that Kaito was a danger who had tricked honest people. But Captain Owen, with dark brown hair and a strict face, looked at the crowd gathering near the bridge and saw the fear Victor had caused. He knew the order felt wrong, and for the first time he did not move at once. Then Aria stepped forward. Her silver hair caught the gray light and her bright blue eyes were full of shock and regret. She had believed Victor because she had trusted rank over her own heart, but now she saw the proof in Kaito's hands and the pain in the faces around him. Kaito did not shout. He lifted the hidden record that Silas had tried to bury, and the people saw the names, the orders, and the false charges. The living crown flared brighter every time Victor tried to push the truth away, turning each air of pressure into strength. Thorn then appeared at the far end of the bridge, horned black armor glowing in the dim light. He wanted chaos because chaos would let him claim the road after Victor fell, but Kaito had changed. He was no longer fighting only for himself. He was fighting for Mina trust, Ben courage, Alina mercy, Owen conscience, and even Aria shame. When Thorn charged, Kaito met the clash head-on and the bridge lit with black and gold light. The force drove Thorn back, Victor lost his grip on the guards, and Silas finally broke under the truth he had served for too long. By dawn, the road was open again. Victor was stripped of power, Silas was taken away, and Owen stood with the people instead of above them. Aria lowered her head and apologized to Kaito, not with excuses, but with real remorse. Kaito accepted it because the fight had taught him something hard and clear. Power without truth was empty, but truth shared with others could change a whole world. As the living crown dimmed above him, Kaito finally walked forward not as a hunted boy, but as a man who knew why he would keep standing.